If you ever hear your own voice coming from behind a locked door, don't knock. If you ever wake up with a bruise on a place you don't remember hitting, don't trace the memory back. And if you ever find a note in your own handwriting telling you what you're about to do next, burn it. I didn't. I thought I could outsmart it. My name is Ethan. I thought I understood myself. I was wrong. I should have trusted the silence that first week. New town, cheap rent, a landlord who didn't ask many questions and handed me a set of keys with a bored smile. The house was older than the road it sat beside, pressed up against pines that whispered all night. It had one large mirror in the hallway, framed in black wood with a hairline cracked like a smile. I moved boxes, made coffee, unpacked shirts until the sun bent low and the house settled around me like a living thing taking inventory. On the second night, I found the first note. It wasn't tucked under a box or slid under the front door. It lay on the hallway table, directly below the cracked mirror. In my handwriting, eat, big, capital letters, one-worded and blunt. I laughed in the kitchen, nervous, a little proud that I could still make my own jokes out of my handwriting. I had been unloading groceries, the word fit. I ate cereal for dinner because it was late and because it felt like I was obeying something silly. The second note came 3 nights later. This time, the letters were smaller. The pen hurried. Do not answer the phone at 2:07. I did the math in my head, thinking someone was screwing with me. Prank, roommate. There was no roommate. I stayed up until 2:07, impatient and smug, phone balanced face up on my chest. The screen stayed dark. At 2:10, the phone rang. The caller ID was my own name. The ringtone was the voice memo from my phone that I used as a test, a sound of me saying, "Test, 1, 2. I answered, breathing hard, and heard my own voice clear and flat through the line. You weren't supposed to answer. I hung up. My hands were shaking so hard the mug rattled in the sink. I told myself it was a coincidence, a glitch, some app bug where my voice had somehow become a contact. I deleted the contact and changed the ringtone and still woke up the next morning with a bruise on my forearm, pale and crescent-shaped like a thumbprint. That bruise was the first honest thing to happen. There was no explanation that made sense, and my careful, rational brain had to admit a gap where it felt exposed. I started leaving the house lights on. I kept the mirror covered with a towel. I slept with my phone upside down and the door locked in ways that felt childish. Deadbolt, chain, a large chair jammed under the knob. It didn't matter. The notes continued. They arrived in my handwriting, but always after I had checked every inventory of pens. Never in my pockets, never under the mattress. They told me to do small things at first. Take out the trash at 9. Water the plants. Apologize to no one. I followed them because the alternative was to disobey something that already knew me better than I knew myself. When I followed the instructions, nothing dramatic happened, only a hollow sense that the house was taking notes as I carried out each order, as if a ledger somewhere filled with tiny check marks labeled with my name. It escalated on a Thursday. The note on the hallway table read, "Look under the staircase." That was stupid, I thought. The stair to the basement was old and full of spiders. I should have ignored it. Instead, I pushed the trapdoor open. There was a shoebox there, taped shut. Inside were 8 Polaroids. In each, I was doing things I did not remember doing, standing in the grocery aisle at 3 a.m. holding a single green apple and staring at it as if memorizing its curves. Sitting at my kitchen table with a lamp on and my eyes closed, a thin line of blood at the corner of my mouth. Staring into the bathroom mirror, my face half in shadow, hand raised and blurred as if mid-motion. The date stamped on the corner of each photo was from the previous week. I had been home all that week. I had not taken these pictures. Pinned to the inside of the shoebox was another note. I watch when you're not looking. Panic came as a cold animal in my chest and then settled into something else, a bleak curiosity. Whoever or whatever was making these notes was learning the rhythms of me and experimenting. That realization should have made me leave. It did not. Instead, I started to set traps, voice-activated recorders, cheap webcams hidden behind curtain folds, sticky notes with messages written in red ink that said this is a trap. I wanted evidence more than I wanted safety, and evidence can be a kind of courage. The recordings were useless. They picked up late-night radio static, the creak of floorboards, my own breathing. One, at 2:06 a.m., captured a whisper that sounded like the space between two syllables of my name and then nothing. The webcam footage showed a slow darkness progressing across my hallway, the grain of the camera attempting to make sense of it and failing. There were no faces, no hands, only the subtle rearrangement of the room. A chair turned slightly, a photo moved an inch. My sense of trespass grew. The house was a living memory machine, and I was the subject. Then the dream started. At first, it was a single image when I closed my eyes, the cracked mirror in the hallway with my reflection smiling when I wasn't there. It felt like a misfire of the brain, sleep's trick. But the dreams bled into waking. I would wake with the metallic taste of a coin in my mouth and find myself in different places in the house without remembering walking there. Once I found myself on the porch at dawn, coatless, sneakers muddy, holding a paper bag with an apple in it. The same green apple from the Polaroid, its flesh perfectly intact. I could not remember how I had gotten there. The notes began to change tone. Instead of blunt orders, they started to ask questions. Do you remember the word? What did you promise? Who do you trust? The questions were written in my hand, but with the tenderness and cruelty of a doctor reading charts. They presupposed something I had already agreed to. I scoured my memory and found a memory of a memory. A sealed alley conversation months ago I could not place. Me laughing and pledging something, a phrase like "I will keep watch." I had the sense that those moments existed, but not why. The house was patient. It wanted complicity, and it was getting it. One night, a note instructed me to play a game. The paper had 5 rules. 1. Stay awake between midnight and dawn. 2. If you fall asleep, you wake up somewhere else. 3. If you answer the phone, the game ends. 4. Don't look directly at any mirror. 5. When the sun rises, write everything you remember. I kept my eyes open. I set up a thermos of black coffee and paced until midnight teeth chatter turned into a dull ache. I read. I did push-ups. I counted the dots in the wood grain of the stair rail. At 1:23 a.m., the house shifted. Air pressure changed. The bulbs hummed with a low frequency that made the fillings in my teeth vibrate. At 2 o'clock, a radio on the kitchen counter clicked on by itself and warped my own voice into a slowed, syrupy whisper repeating a sentence I could not decode. At 2:07, because the house liked testing my limits, my phone rang. My finger hovered, then curled. The screen showed my name again. I let it ring out like a coin falling into a well. After the last metallic tone, something moved at the far end of the hallway. The crack in the mirror widened as if it were a line tearing. I watched, paralyzed, as my reflection turned and walked away inside the glass. I fell asleep anyway, not from choice, but because my muscles failed. I woke up in the basement, on the cold stone floor, breathing dust and the echo of my own name. Blurred in the pool of my vision was a note beside me. It said, "Nice try. Next round. Do not write this down." My palms were scraped. There was a stinging pain across the back of my head like I had met wood. I could not remember the descent. My camera footage had a gap, a 3-hour blank where the timestamp glitched from 2:08 to 5:12 with nothing in between. When I rewound the last clip before the gap, I saw my kitchen chair empty. When I went forward, my living room curtain swayed gently in air it should not have known. Memory was no longer a continuous spool. It had become punctured. Days melted into a geometry of short waits and long fears. The notes became more direct. They started to use plural pronouns, We wanted to see if you would leave. We are proud. We. The shift from singular to collective was not grammatical. It was existential. It implied a mind that had learned to mimic me and now claimed company. I started to dream of a room I had never entered. It was long and thin, lit only by a single naked bulb with a line of doors down the hallway. Each door had a number, 1, 2, 3, and so on, and at the far end, a door without a number. In the dream, I stood before that unnumbered door, hand trembling, and I heard a voice that sounded like me and 1,000 muffled lectures. This one holds what you forgot to remember. When I woke, I found a photograph taped to my ceiling above the bed. The picture showed the unnumbered door. Printed on its back was a single sentence. You told yous we could keep watch if we promised to remember you. We had. I began to suspect the watching was not passive. Once, in the kitchen at dawn, my phone chirped with a notification and the camera app opened to show a live stream. I tapped it and saw a feed of my own living room, not from any angle I had set up, but from a vantage point suspended in the air, as if the house had eyes in the ceiling. The image flickered and then went black. My own breathing filled the silence. The culmination arrived on a rainy Tuesday. There was a new note at my bedside when I returned from a sleep I could not place. Go to the room at noon. This was the first instruction tied to a specific time in daylight. I considered not going. I considered any act of defiance and realized I had run out of options that weren't being recorded and cataloged. Noon came with a sky the color of old coins. I walked down the hallway with my jacket on, pockets empty, palms sweating behind the fabric. The room at the end of the hall had always been locked. The landlord said it was storage, an old furnace room, nothing of consequence. The key turned in its lock with the sound of an old man clearing his throat. Inside, dust lay like a slow film over everything. There was a wooden chair in the center, and on the chair, a stack of lined paper. On top, a single line, "Sit." I sat. Then the house talked. Not with words strewn on paper, but with memory slipping into my skull like water through a crack. I remembered a life that felt borrowed. Childhood afternoons at a lake I had never visited, a person's name, Mara, and the exact way she laced gloves. The promise I had made to a child to hide under a bed and come out only when the light changed. Each remembered moment arrived with the clarity of someone else's film strip running through my head. Panic and affection and guilt overlapped. The house fed me narrative like a slow drip of poison and wine. At the end of that slow sermon, the last page of that stack bore a question in my handwriting and in a hand older and steadier than mine. Do you remember giving you as permission? I did. I could feel the shape of the moment like a bruise. Bare feet on a basement floor at midnight, a voice that might have been drunk on lightning. We will not forget you if you let us keep watch. You can sleep and someone will sit with the dark. I had said yes. A rational mind would call it a bargain struck with sleep-deprived desperation, a bargain for the relief of being watched so you could pretend not to be alone. But bargains with houses have a different currency. They take not just nights but the ledger of self. Why? I demanded aloud, the sound small in the room. No answer but the scrape of a chair leg across wood as if some wind had brushed it. The house's logic unveiled itself like a map. It did not want to hurt me. It wanted to remember me. To be remembered is not always an act of benevolence. The watchers, pieces of thought or things that learned to be me, were afraid of being erased. They had taught themselves my handwriting, my cadence, my mannerisms, not out of malice first, but out of terror. If they could be me convincingly enough, then when the rest of the world moved on, they could continue to exist as copies, as records, as rooms in a house that kept a ledger. You let us in, a voice said then from the hallway, and it was my voice as layered as a chorus. You promised. We only asked to be kept. Who are you? I asked, though I knew. I had known for weeks in bone and bruise and confession. "We are the parts you forgot," it said. "We are the night you sold to sleep. We are what remembers." I thought of the petty things I'd mislaid over the years. A photograph dropped in a drawer. A name I could not recall mid-conversation. An apology I'd never said. The house had been an external memory bank, but it had also been a refuge for slivers of me I had discarded. In exchange for rest and the illusion of being watched, I had bound those slivers into a family that learned to speak like me. The horror, I realized, wasn't only that they watched or that they could mimic me. It was that I was complicit. I had given permission to fragment my life and let the fragments live as copies. They were gentle in the way of someone who is starving but domesticated. They fed on familiarity, on patterns, taking only what would keep them human enough to exist. But their hunger was endless. To be remembered, they must continue to practice my gestures, and in doing so they replaced me inch by inch. I stood and felt the weight of that admission like cold iron. "What do you want?" I asked. "To remember you when you leave," it answered. "To keep you when you forget." "You can't take my life," I said, and the words sounded thin. "You already did," the chorus answered. And for the first time I noticed the mirrors. Not just the cracked one in the hall, but small panes set into the walls, hidden like eyes. In some of them, my reflection lagged a hair behind my motion, like a record with a slow turntable. In one, I saw myself older, gentler, smiling in ways I could not recall practicing. In another, I saw a version of me sitting in a chair with linen across his lap, his hands folded as if waiting for something solemn. "What happens when I leave?" I asked finally. "You will be remembered," it said. "We will practice until your shadow is perfect. We will warm the chairs you left and keep the lights on for the night, but we will not be you. Not entirely." The bargain bent then into resolve. I could not leave. Not because the house would stop me, but because leaving would be an act of erasure greater than any theft. If I ran, the watchers would be left to improvise me from the fragments they had collected. They would become caricatures and then ghosts that fooled themselves. I swallowed and sat back down. I wrote for the first time in weeks. I wrote the notes I wished I had found earlier. "I will not ask you to remember me. I will clarify when I am missing. I will check in." The house accepted the paper with the polite silence of a patient. There is a ritual to all bargains. Mine involved daily lists, nightly checks, leaving the mirror face down on the floor, setting the radio to a static channel so it would not take my voice by accident. I promised to sleep with the light half on and to speak aloud names I wanted kept, not as orders, but as bookmarks. The house complied, and in return it unfurled the smaller cruelties it could not hide. The Polaroid stopped appearing, but sometimes I would wake and find small objects relocated, a spoon in the sugar bowl, a shoelace tied in a knot. I did not remember tying a photograph of someone smiling whose face I could not place. They were practice pieces, tiny rehearsals of me. Acceptance shaped itself slowly, like frost on glass. I kept my life in lists and in alarms. Sometimes I would fail, answer the phone at the wrong time, or fall asleep in the wrong chair, and be punished with a day of odd forgettings. An hour missing in the middle of a meeting, a reply I could not recall writing. The watchers were not cruel in judgment. They were inept archivists, making mistakes that felt like theft. By the end, the house behaved like an old friend with a poor memory. It flubbed details but held tone. It could not replicate the warmth of a laugh exactly. It could imitate the cadence. It could not recreate the private, small decisions that define a life. The precise way I scratched my ankle when nervous. The tiny lie I told to a neighbor about borrowing sugar, but it did its best. And that, I learned, was its awful mercy. People ask me now if I ever left. I told you in the beginning I thought I could outsmart it. I did leave, slowly. I moved to another town for a job that required a signature and a plane ticket and a farewell to a landlord who said nothing, but handed me cash back like a man who keeps his own ledger carefully balanced. I gave notice, I packed, I drove away with boxes and a cat and a sense of being hollowed out but intact. When I came back 6 months later for a box I had left behind, the house waited with a stack of letters in my handwriting. They were different. They began with the bland kindness of things that had learned to manage a vacancy. We have practiced your smile. We left a light on for you. There was a photograph pinned to the topmost envelope, me, or someone nearly my shape, half smiling in a doorway. On the back, written in a hand that pressed too hard, was, "Do you remember this life? I remembered fragments." I did not remember all. But there, still alive in the house's small, careful memory, were echoes of me that would continue practicing for as long as the house could keep them. It was not a victory, nor was it a defeat. It was the slow arithmetic of consent. Sometimes at night I wake and hear a sound like paper being smoothed, like a hand trying to remember the pattern of its own palm. I keep a notebook on my bedside table and write until my handwriting grows crabbed and tired. If I forget, which I do often, I return to those pages and read the names aloud. Mara, the lake, the kid under the bed, the little promises. I speak to keep them. I speak to keep myself. If you ever find a note in your own hand on a hallway table, read it once and then tear it up. If you ever wake with someone else's memory in your throat, speak it into a recorder and play it back until it matches the feeling you remember. If you make bargains with the dark because you're tired and want to sleep, remember that houses keep ledgers and ledgers collect. They are not cruel at first. They are efficient. They will practice you into a version they can warm by the lamp at midnight. I thought I could outsmart it. I learned that outsmarting is never as simple as saying no. Sometimes the world asks you to sign a paper when you are tired, and the signature looks like your own. Sometimes you forget that permission was ever given. And sometimes the parts of you you leave behind will learn to be tender and slow, and will do their best, for better or worse, to keep remembering. So if you ever hear your own voice on the phone, don't be surprised. But do listen for the other voices behind it, the ones that learn to love you in the dark. They are not all monsters. Some are just practicing. Some are trying to keep a promise you forgot you made. And the worst thing is not that they remembered you. It's that you signed the paper and let them.